We're doing it. We are finally doing it, man. I'm sure a lot of you must be looking at the title and y'all must be like, whoa, it's time. Oh, it's time. It is time because listen, y'all, we are in mid-month break. I was like, yo, it's about time that we make this video that I have been alluding to for so long. Every single time Oda goes bananas for a particular stretch of time, I'm like, yo, this could be on the list. On the invisible proverbial list of greatest stretch of chapters in all of One Piece. And what do I mean by greatest stretch of chapters? Or in this case, my personal favorite stretches of chapters in this series. I do not mean volumes nor arcs. Those videos will most certainly be coming. I did a favorite volumes list, favorite One Piece volumes list when this channel first started, the second channel, the underscore, the one that you guys are currently watching. I did a favorite volumes list very early on in this particular channel's lifespan, like 2016 or something. And I was planning on making a part 2 to the favorite volumes list whenever volume 100 comes out. So when volume 100 comes out, we'll do the favorite volumes list. This is not a favorite arcs list either. Y'all already know that will be coming at some point here in the near future after Wano is officially over. So that'll be coming then. This is stretches of chapters. So for example, when we look at we can look at particular stretches that take place from, like, for example, post Enies Lobby to Thriller Bark. I can have something there because this is a particular stretch of chapters that took place in one arc and in the other, but the momentum continued going, right? Or if you want to take the end of Alabasta going into Jaya, that is a particular stretch of chapters that can be taken here because the momentum continued going. They don't have to be just exclusive to one arc. We're talking about Oda continuing the momentum, a crazy, crazy set of momentum for a consecutive stretch of chapters. So we look at like the most legendary stretches in the series where Oda's very famous for this, right? For having just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's a banger, 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 back to back to back. And so that's how I'm valuing and scaling this, is how much do I value that momentum, that peak versus others. Because there are certain moments that I prefer that I don't necessarily prefer the entire stretch. You feel me? So I'll give you a quick example. Volume 9 is one of my favorite volumes in the whole series, and whenever we get to the volumes list, we'll talk about it, right? Episode 37, chapter 81, with the walk to Arlong Park is one of my favorite moments of all time. This is not on the list because that particular stretch of volume 9 does not, to me, hold up to the other ones, right? Like it has a moment and it has the flashback and all of that, which is incredible, and it's back to back to back. But I hold the things we're about to talk about and their back to back to back moments, or their back to back to back, just keeping the momentum at an extremely high level. I hold that higher than I hold this one. And so that's why this is not a volumes list and or moments and or arcs list. This is just talking about particular stretches of chapters where Oda just went bananas, right? And we know he's famous for that. And so as we go through the list, you guys will see what I'm talking about here. I did cheat on some of these. There are some of these that I most certainly cheated, especially for number 1. We'll get to that whenever we get there. But we're going to start this off with an honorable mention. And this is a very recent one in the post-time skip. I mean, not recent. It's been like 10 years. But it's still recent in my mind, right? Because it feels like it just happened just yesterday. But this was the first time post-time skip that we got a stretch of chapters that was just going absolutely bananas. And I don't know if this is me, like, just all of us were just so excited to see when the next like crazy stretch was going to be, and we got it back in Punk Hazard with chapters 687 to 694. And once again, I don't know if this is the bias from the anime community and just remembering how crazy we were going for Zoro cutting Monet, Luffy coming in and pushing the Flagnards out of Caesar, followed by the Grizzly Magnum, or actually followed by Law cutting Punk Hazard in half, and then the Grizzly Magnum. And then on top of that, you have Don Quixote Dia Flamingo getting up out of seat and stating, I'm on the way there. Like, yo, that was a crazy time to be reading this series. And so there's a lot of bias, not just with this pick, but for the rest of this list too, when it comes to the weekly One Piece experience, right? There's been a lot of stretches where we're like, whoa, like, hold up, man, Oda's going nuts. He's going nuts! And so that is an honorable mention because it had to be somewhere on this list. I look back on Punk Hazard, especially the end of Punk Hazard, fondly because of those memories here within the community. So that is going to be here at number 11. Shout out to that stretch in Punk Hazard, man. So coming in at number 10, we have a great stretch of chapters that whenever I initially first went through it, it was in the anime. It was episodes 105 to 109, which is the Rain-Based Cafe section of Alabasta. In the manga, it is chapters 168 to 176. The Rain-Based Cafe, I mean, I feel like Oda had already showed this to me throughout the story up until this point. But what the Rain-Based Cafe showed me when I first went through One Piece is the type of story that it is. That it does not need to have these extremely action-heavy moments to deliver immersion to that degree. I was so immersed the first time that I watched this that I still remember how I felt about it to this day. All right, to this day. Because the thing is, right, being so early into the anime and manga game, and not just anime and manga, but just the stories in general, I didn't know I could be so immersed in a situation like that and not having a lot of action take place. What was taking place here was basically the Straw Hats attempting to escape this place, right, as Crocodile and Baroque Works are going in like swimwear. They're doing their thing. We see that it looks unwinnable. It looks like there's no way that we are going to be able to escape this. And then Mr. Prince comes up in the like swimwear, and it's payoff to what we had recently just got in Little Garden, and you're like, oh my goodness, they really did never see Sanji. And so it's like this culmination of all of this craziness, because up until this point in One Piece, the stretches that always had me the most immersed was the end, you know, leading into Luffy going up in like swimwear, like the backstory in the cases of Drum Island and Along Park, where you would have these incredible flashbacks that would lead into the final battles of that arc, and then of course the aftermath. All of that was always the stuff I look forward to the most. And Alabasta, there's a particular stretch later on that's really good too, with all the Straw Hats just going in and in and in. But the Rain-Based Cafe section to me is so special because that's when I knew that One Piece was built different. Like, this is a series that does not have to rely on that final section. We can get something like this super early on in the arc and have it just blow my mind. It really felt like I was watching like Ocean's 11 One Piece version. I was going crazy because the stakes felt like they were so high. I was like, how in the world are we going to get out of this? And Mr. Prince comes up in like swimwear to save the day, man. Shout out to Mr. Prince, dude. I love the Rain-Based Cafe, and then, you know, with the smokers. I love that section of the story, man. So shout out to Rain-Based. That is going to be my number 10. Number 9, man. Now listen to me, once again, the weekly One Piece experience is special. I wanted this to be higher, man, I really did, but it's just there's been so many legendary stretches in this series. And number 9 is going to be the Dressrosa Insanity, man. If y'all were there, y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. Chapters 729, 730, and 731. Chapter 729 has Doflamingo annihilating Law, followed by a 730 where Big Mom's ship shows up. And at the time, once again, this is weekly bias, right? At the time, we were like, wait a minute. Wait just a minute, yo. Is that actually Big Mom on the ship? Because remember, at the time, we were already dealing with Fujitora and Doflamingo. So we were like, yo, Dressrosa's going crazy. Dressrosa was popping off. I mean, we had just gotten off of Sanji clashing with Doflamingo. Luffy's in the tournament to get back Ace's fruit. I mean, it is popping. We had just recently gotten news that Okiji could possibly be part of the Blackbeard Pirates. I mean, Dressrosa was popping. And so in the midst of that, now you have the Law and Doflamingo storyline popping off. The man shoots him in cold blood. We go to 7:30 where Sanji's like, let me challenge Big Mom. And Luffy gives him the okay. I was losing my mind, dude. I remember reading that in my college library and I was going so crazy. I could not wait to go home and review this chapter on the old channel. It was that type of chapter, right? 7:30. And I was like, this is insane. But nothing could prepare me. Once again, 7:29, Law going in like swimwear. Doflamingo going in like swimwear against Law. 7:30, Big Mom's ship shows up, and in the midst of this, Fujitora starts boxing Zoro. Then 7:31 happens, and we get the reintroduction of Sabo into the story. One of the most emotional moments in the entire series. Just when you thought it could not get any more insane, when you thought the momentum could not peak any higher, he ends off this stretch. And that year, 2013, if I'm mistaken, I think that was the final chapter of that year, with Sabo. So you go from craziness with Doflamingo and Law, Big Mom shows up, and Sabo greatness, man. This stretch will always have a special place in my heart, as being one of the first stretches that I was able to cover here on the channel, or on the old channel, of just legendary magnitude. And they all have a special place in my heart, all three of those chapters, because I was so scared for Law's life. Big Mom showing up was one of the crazy, or her ship, it wasn't herself, but her ship, but we didn't know at the time. It was like, holy flag darts, right? And then the Sabo moment, man, that moment really made me realize like just how much the series means to me. And that was the birth of the Afterthought, so many different things, but that's just weekly bias. And I'll always hold that Sabo moment in high regard. And so that stretch is really special to me, man. Shout out to that stretch in Dressrosa. Now this next one is all bias, all personal bias, because these three chapters, or I should say in particular the last two, they mean so much to me that even against all of these legendary moments that happen back to back to back, this that seems so small, which I cannot wait when we do favorite volumes of all time, once again part 2, because I'm going to be able to go more in depth into this, but that this stretch of chapters somehow made it on here. And that, like I said, this is my own personal bias, man, because these moments just mean so much to me, bro, like on a personal level. To me, like, even against all of these, this is like top 1 possible material right here, man, in terms of favorite stretches. And this is just because of how powerful these two moments are for me. And this is the legendary chapters 223 to 225 stretch in Jaya, which is from the moment that we arrive in Mocktown until the People's Dreams Never End speech. And the reason why I love this stretch of chapters so much, I could have like a whole list, right? Like I said, a whole list of why this means so much to me. But this is so much about why I love One Piece in 3 chapters. Getting into a new island, being introduced to new, quirky, and mysterious characters. You have the GOAT trio and Luffy, Zoro, and Nami going through this place, attempting to find and gather information. And what follows that is the legendary chapter 224 and 225, which shows Bellamy going in against Luffy and Zoro. And Luffy's like, we ain't fighting back. All right, going back to chapter 1 with Shanks, he has his own Shanks moment where he is the bigger man and he decides he is not going to fight back. And that was a major life lesson to me as a kid reading this, right? Like, that was something huge, something that I still carry on with me to this day. Sometimes you just got to be the bigger man. And I love that moment so much and what it means, not only just from a storytelling standpoint, but at the time, you know, it was so tense. You're like, yo, why aren't they doing anything about this? And then you go over, you start flipping some more pages, and you see this cherry pie eating individual that we had just met. And he starts talking about the most legendary speech to me, not only in this series, but of ever. This speech means so much to me, especially with context and knowing who he is, and he is Blackbeard. Talking about people's dreams never end. And just with those two chapters, I know this is supposed to be 3, but I just included 223 because, you know, you enter an island, and I needed a 3rd chapter, right? I just had to have this on the list somewhere because I love these moments way too much. If this were a favorite moments list, this would be like potentially 2. You know, it was number 1 for years, but right, recent events, right? But I adore this moment with every fiber in my being, and Jaya and Skypiea is so special for the themes of dreams, what it means to dream, how far you're willing to go for your dream, and things of that nature. But these chapters in particular, with Luffy and Zoro not fighting back against Bellamy, was just so powerful. And the way in which that is followed by the main antagonist of this series telling our crew that people's dreams never end, man. It is a stretch that only gets better with time. And like I said, moments-wise, it may not match up to the others, but in my heart, it does. It does. I love this stretch in Jaya and Skypiea, man. Coming up next, this one was so hard to rank personally because this has top 5 potential in terms of just how crazy this stretch of chapters is, right? This, the tension that's here has, I don't think it's ever been matched since, right? Like, this is just such an insane stretch of chapters, and it covers so much. I've reread this so many times, and it is the legendary chapters 506 to 513 stretch in Sabaody. Now, Sabaody, I am very much looking forward to talking about that in the favorite arcs list when we get to that. But especially, like, this doesn't even have my favorite moment in the arc. My favorite moment in the arc is Luffy punching the Celestial Dragon, and how masterfully that was put together. But the thing is, from the moment chapter 506 starts with Roger and Rayleigh, Rayleigh starts talking about Goldie Roger. My man almost spoils what the One Piece is. We get a phenomenal character moment with Luffy. Then, as we cut out to the outside world, Kizaru gets introduced in this story. We start seeing Kizaru boxing everyone. The pacifists are starting moving. We didn't know. We just knew Kuma. So we saw one Kuma, then we saw 2 Kumas, and we're like, what in the flying flag north is going on? So there's like a million Kumas. Everything's popping off. Kizaru's pointing everyone. We finish our conversation with Rayleigh, which was very spooky in and of itself. He talks more about Roger, and it's like, holy sweet mother of Flagnards, this is insane. This is insane. And so we continue on from that. Then we go to the outside. We come in front of these massive, destructive individuals. And now what we have is that we're giving everything that we possibly have just to take on a pacifista. A pacifista! And then Kizaru starts going up in like swimwear. He steps on Zoro's head. Bro, my man is about to annihilate Zoro, man. Then he gets kicked by Rayleigh. Rayleigh with the Conqueror's coded chancletas on comes in and starts boxing Kizaru while the real Kuma shows up, and then we all get separated in one of the most emotional and shocking moments in the entire series. This is undoubtedly, undeniably the most like shook I have ever been while reading One Piece, man. I was shook. All right, and this is another prime example of what I'm talking about when I'm measuring these stretches of chapters against favorite volumes. Because, son, this volume is legendary. This volume, and even though volume 53, of course, has the chapter 513, so chapter 512 ends volume 52. So even then, you know, it's in 2 different volumes. But still, regardless, volume 52 is one of the greatest volumes in all of One Piece. And that stuff right there, there's just, that was one of the easiest alley-oops I had on this list. I was like, yo, this has to be on the list. This has to be on the list. That stuff I just said was all back to back to back to back to back. It has everything. It has tension. It has mystery. It has stakes. It has an amazing character introduction in Kizaru. It has feeding into the lore. It has phenomenal character moments. And it has the craziest cliffhanger in any arc to this day. To this day. Sabaody greatness, man. Coming up next, we have, oh man, dude. I still can't believe, there's a part of me that still believes this is a spoiler. Like, there's just no way that we actually got this, man. Yo, from chapter 964 to chapter 967, and to me this is so personal because for so long I had rewatched the Roger moments in the anime, right? Like, the legendary episode 400, the amazing moment in Return to Sabaody whenever Roger tells Rayleigh that he wants to turn the world upside down, and in Logue Town, the filler sequences of Roger. I loved watching the Roger flashbacks because in those flashbacks we would get not only a hint into Roger's character, but the spirit of One Piece within those moments as well. And when we actually started seeing Roger's adventure, and not just Roger's adventure with Odin, man, we got to have Whitebeard greatness, prime beard greatness. You know, Odin meeting Toki, and then we get that goated, yo, man. Y'all want to talk about Santa Hat level moments? When Roger and Whitebeard clashed, I said that is the pinnacle of this flashback. There's no way that can be passed. And what does Oda do? Right after Roger and Whitebeard clash, we get Goldie Roger's adventure, his final journey around the world, as he heads to Laugh Tale, and we get to have one of the most legendary moments in the entire series, which is the He Laughed. Come on, man. It's Roger's adventure with his squad to the One Piece. And that was preceded by Roger and Whitebeard clashing. A Conquerors go to clash, they didn't even touch. They were destroying the whole planet. I love this stretch of... I still can't believe it happened. I'm still... Even whenever I watch reactions to it in the anime, I'm like, yo, I still can't believe this happened, man. I love this stretch so much, and this is undoubtedly going to remain here, potentially for the rest of the series. I think so. I mean, we're going to have more legendary stretches, right? So it's going to be tough to keep any of these on the list. But this flashback was just so special, and like I said, with the weekly experience part, and since this is something we had been waiting to see for so long, it was just like triple that. Like, man, this is the Roger flash. Like, this is what we had been wanting to see for so many years. A portion of Roger's flashback and not cutting to anything else. And the fact that we got it through Odin's eyes was just so good, man. I love this flashback. The Odin flashback is already my favorite flashback in the series, and it's for moments like this. It is for moments like this, man. Shout out to that flashback, dude. This top 5 could be placed in any order, and I'll be like, yo, you're right. You're right. That is my own personal top 5. Because on any given day, these can switch. That is how close they are, because they all take such a massive part as to why I love this series as much as I do. And a big part of that are these legendary stretches that only Oda can go on, man, you know? And what I mean by only Oda can go on is with my attachment to this series on a personal level. When he goes in a legendary stretch, I feel it. It strikes a chord more than any other. And that's, like I said, my own personal bias. That is my own personal bias towards this series. And so starting off that, speaking of personal biases, is the legendary Volume 61 greatness, man. And it's not just Volume 61, but it's Volume 60 as well. And it is in specifically the chapter 590 to chapter 601 stretch, which is from the moment that Luffy remembers his Nakama in that legendary moment with Jinbei right after the ASL flashback, where he puts out his hands in one of the most iconic and emotional panels in the entire series, and remembers. He remembers what's most important, bro. What he still has left. And one of the most goated Luffy moments. And the moment that we all were like, Jinbei, you are our crew member whether you join or not. You're our boy, dude. That's my dog, Jinbei. We follow that up with the Dodon and Garp greatness. And the Shanks in front of Ace's grave scene, bro. Oh, man. And then you go around the world and you see what's happening around the world, which has added so much to the theories we've had since before the time skip. And you always know when we go around the world, it's always peak, baby. And then, all of us wanting to see the Straw Hats with every fiber in our being outside of cover pages, we finally get to see updates on where each individual Straw Hat is. And it's like, yo, then you have Luffy going back to Marineford, the 3D2Y greatness, right? We'll meet again in 3D 2 years, right? Cross out the 3 days. Post time skip season incoming. And then my boy picks up the hat once again, and we start returning to Sabaody in such a special stretch of chapters. Like I said, this is not a favorite volumes list. If this was a favorite volumes list, y'all know how high volume 61 is for me, man. But because I'm measuring just moments and how the momentum goes, like I said, on this given day, tomorrow could be number 1. Tomorrow could be number 1. I love this stretch of chapters, man. Post Marineford, going into Return to Sabaody, and then, the first Jet Gatling post time skip, getting the crew back together, that Luffy moment to Rayleigh, like, I will become the king of the pirates. We get to see them flexing post time skip. I mean, it is just, to me, as somebody who loves time skip so much, this is just such a well executed time skip, man. I love it with every fiber in my being. It always puts a smile on my face, which is why I always spoke about always carrying volume 61 with me whenever I was in my first go around in college, and I love that volume so much, bro. And so I had to have it somewhere in here. Y'all know that how much of that stretch means to me. So it's the post Marineford Return to Sabaody stretch, bro. What more needs to be said? What more needs to be said, man? Coming up next, need I say more? Do I need to say any more? Yo! I am personally so excited to do this volumes list to see how high I put this. Because listen to me, man. This stretch of chapters on a weekly basis, we're talking about weekly bias here. The weekly bias could not be higher than it is with this pick, right? Maybe a little higher than this. But specifically, from chapters 902, which is the end of Whole Cake Island, one of my favorite endings to an arc. From the end of Whole Cake Island, we get the entire Reverie stretch and the beginning of Wano. Oda wrote those back to back to back to back to back to back in 2018. He wrote the end of Whole Cake Island, which still has one of my favorite anime adaptations I have ever seen in episode 877. But just keeping it to the manga here, with chapter 902 perfectly bringing Whole Cake Island to a close. We go around the world, we get the legendary 5th Emperor chapter, which is one of the most hyped chapters ever. We finally get to meet the Revolutionary Army commanders in the following chapter. Then we get What a Wonderful World chapter with Shirahoshi. We're getting ready for the Reverie. We see that Sabo and the boys are getting ready. Gang, let's go. 906, we switch over to Mari Joa. Anytime we switch to the Mari Joa, it's going to be a 10 out of 10 chapter. We get to see the giant Straw Hat in the Holy Land, and what that is followed by is chapter 907 with Rocks, the Big Mom and Kaido stuff, the empty throne, and to end it all, we have Shanks in a hoodie talking to the Gorosei with Robert D. Lucci boxing in a chapter. And in that same chapter, we see the individual in Mealsguard from the Fishman Island flashback, who's actually a good dude. And then that's not even the peak. Well, then we have one more chapter in the Reverie where we see chapter 908 with the Reverie actually beginning. Before the Reverie begins, we have the Kuma and Jewelry Bonnie plotline, which still has not been resolved. We have Sabo, angry as can be, ready to go up in like swimwear. We're like, baby, let's go. Then we finish it off with the spookiest set of panels in the entire series, with the same individual that saw the giant Straw Hat now with a couple of photos in front of him, all pieced out and together. They call him by a name, Instant Messenger Sama. Instant Messenger Sama goes in, he walks up and goes and sits down on the empty throne that we thought nobody could sit on, as the Gorosei kneel before this individual and state, when or what is the next light that needs to be extinguished? And ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't end there. It does not end there. Because that is the greatest that lore piece has ever been. That is the end of a phenomenal arc in Whole Cake Island. That is a lore piece, extravaganza around the world piece, the best around the world extravaganza piece we've ever had. From 903 to 908. Wano starts. And we get to see for the first time, for me, and for those of you who are caught up, this was the first time we had seen these characters in 2.5 years. For the first time in 2.5 years, we saw Robin, Frankie, Usopp, and Zoro. And my dog Zoro had one of his best moments in this chapter, where it was just like, Wano's gonna be godly. And I was right. We were right. Wano was legendary. But the fact of the matter remains is that we ended one amazing arc, had the GOAT of transition arcs, and then started another arc. And it was just, this stretch of chapters on a weekly basis is unmatched. It is unmatched. In terms of, like I said, if you are lore piece to the max, like if that is your thing when it comes to One Piece's theories and lore, this stretch of chapters for you, I'm pretty sure is number one. This was just so special to experience. And we kept seeing how it was trending every single week, how all of us were losing our minds every single week. And it was so special. I'll never forget this time. I'll always hold this stretch of chapters very near and dear to my heart, man. I love this stretch of chapters, so we still reread it because there's still stuff to dissect there that's going to be important to the end game. So shout out to chapter 902 to 909, man. This is a goat stretch of chapters, dude. With this pick, we're cheating. I'm cheating with this pick, all right? I really am, because it's so heavily based on nostalgia. I've said this many times, but Water 7 in his lobby was the last arc that I watched in the anime before transitioning to the manga. And so because of that arc in particular in the anime has just, y'all have no idea how much nostalgia I have for that arc, right? And then in the manga, it's so special to me too. And if, once again, going back to the volume list, volume 41 is extremely high for me. So in this one, I could not choose, because these moments all just mean the same thing to me in a different way, right? And that is the incredible, legendary episodes 229, to 236 stretch, which is the beginning of Water 7. And also covering the legendary episodes 272 to 278 stretch. But anime aside, manga chapter-wise, 322 to 333, which is the same thing as the beginning of Water 7 ending in the Luffy vs. Usopp fight. The chapters 387 to 398, which is 387 is the Gear 2nd versus Blue Note, 398 is the I Want to Live chapter. And also chapters 327 to 334, which chapter 327 is the finale of Luffy versus Lucci, of course, legendary stuff right there, all the way to 334, which 334, ladies and gentlemen, chapter 334 of One Piece has Shanks and Whitebeard clashing, and the chapter ends with Blackbeard finding Ace. Ladies and gentlemen, all of these are why I love One Piece from the bottom of my heart. This is when this series just reached the level that it is for me at this point in time, right? It was with this arc, and like I said, this is not an arc list, but I can't separate these from each other because they just mean the same thing to me. They mean this particular part in the story where One Piece just became the GOAT for me, right? And it felt like up until that point in time it already was, especially with the Sky PS stuff, the Arlong Park stuff, the Drum Island stuff, the Alabasta stuff. But this just solidified it, man. And to this day, when I go back and reread this stuff, it hits different. It hits different, and this is one of those stretches that it hits different for me personally, and especially creatively, because this was the particular point in the story where I decided I want to do this for a living. I want to write a story one day that makes somebody feel the same way that I felt while experiencing this. Because that stretch at the beginning of this arc, the moment that Water 7 starts until Luffy versus Usopp, that entire stretch right there to me is perfect. There is nothing wrong with that. I am an individual that is very overly analytical, as you guys know. I dissect every panel, every page. That's why we have 1 hour reactions, right? I do that even outside of reacting to stuff. It's for series that I like. If I don't like it, or that I'm really, really invested in. If I'm not invested in it, I'll read it and that'll be that. But if I'm really invested in it, like I am in this series, we're there for a minute. And so the thing is with this is that the beginning of this arc is so special, so well done with everything. And it's just, to this day, I have no idea how Oda pulled this off weekly, because to me, it would seem near impossible to pull this off with multiple revisions. He did this weekly. having 3 of the most legendary stretches in one saga. My man's had the incredible stretch that had so much greatness going down, and that was weekly. I just don't get it. I don't get it, man. And so it's like the way he set up Water 7 in the beginning, with those back to back to back to back. CP9. What in the flying flatness is happening with Nico Robin? Usopp? Usopp with the money? The walk to the Frankie house? Why are we having this dialogue right now with Luffy and Usopp where it looks like they're about to start throwing hands? They're going merry. That to me is the most realistic argument I have ever seen portrayed in any type of fiction. And once again, it's because of the investment we have in these characters. And it was like, that's coming directly off of them fighting for them in the walk to the Frankie house, and one of the most iconic and epic moments in the series. Then we cut over, because that chapter in that episode ends with Luffy stating, okay, it's time for us to get a new ship. We cut over, and it continues on with that. And I love that episode in the anime, episode 235. And we get that incredible conversation between the two. The tension is at its absolute highest. And that's whenever Usopp leaves the crew. And you have these moments between all the characters. Sanji even tells Luffy, like, yo, don't say what you're about to say. And then we go to 236, man. AKA chapter 333, titled Captain. And that Luffy and Usopp just... It's just peak fiction, right? It's just peak fiction, man. And then just when we think it can't get any more goated, because it's just a setup. This is just a setup. And the rest of Water 7 is immaculate. It is perfect, right? It is so goated. And I mean that with every fiber in my being. But then we cut over to Enies lobby, and we had that stretch of chapters from the moment that Luffy goes Gear Second against Bluno, which we had no idea when the Flying Flatters that was. He uses Gear Second, we're like, what is this? He goes on top, waits for the rest of the squad to get up there. They go on, they had the legendary standoff with them and CP9. You know how much is built into this. Like, oh my goodness, we are here, we're doing this, and the standoff is happening. And then we go into Robin's flashback, which is still to this day one of my favorite flashbacks in this series for so many different reasons. It means so much to me, man. And we cut out the flashback to arguably the greatest chapter in the entire series, in chapter 398, with the end of Robin's flashback cutting into what makes this series so special, into which Luffy looks up at that flag and is like, Soge Kingu, you know what time it is. You know what time it is, man. Shoot down that flag, baby. And he goes in, Wakatela. Burns that thing down to the ground, and Luffy's like, baby, you know why I'm here. You just gotta make the decision. You gotta make the decision. My dog was like, yo, Spandam was like, dog, you know what this means? My dog Luffy's like, I don't give a flying blind darts. I'm here for Robin. And then we get the I Want to Live. It is the pinnacle, the peak is the peak fiction, right, ladies and gentlemen. And that's not even the end of it. Then we go into another stretch of chapters with Luffy and Lucci boxing. We get the end of their magnificent battle where Usopp finally takes off his mask. He's looking down, he's yelling at Luffy. Luffy's like, yo, Usopp, you came too? He gets back up, he promises he's not gonna lose. He defeats him with the legendary Jet Gatling. Then the Going Merry shows up. The Going Merry shows up, rescues them. We have the Going Merry funeral. We go in a post in his lobby. We get to find out who the 4 emperors are. We get to see Kobe again. We get to find out that Garp is Luffy's granddad and the dragon is Luffy's father. Then on top of that, we cut over around the world and we see Shanks boxing Whitebeard. In the same chapter, we get Ace and Yamato. Did I say Yamato? That's how hyped I am. Ace and Blackbeard. Ace and Blackbeard! Come on, man! It's peak! It's peak! And like I said, these stretches could have taken numbers in and of itself on this list, but because they all mean the same thing to me, I could not separate them. And so I cheated and they're all number 3. This is all number 3, man. I love this stretch of chapters so much. And like I said, it has so much to do with personal bias in regards to this stuff right here. Real deal made me choose my career path. Like, from that moment on, I said, I gotta create something like this, man. I can't contain this any longer, dude. I want to make somebody else feel the same way this made me feel. And to this very day, it will always, always be legendary. Always be. I love this stretch of chapters, or this stretch of episodes, because the anime at this point in time was still at its absolute apex. And I loved it. I love this stretch, man. Coming up next, I talk about this stretch so much because to me, it felt like it was just untouchable. And to me, it was untouchable until we reached Final Saga. And the fact there's something higher than this on this list just goes to show just how special this series is. And to a lot of you, if you were to have this at your number one, I 100% would be like, yo, I get it. And matter of fact, if you were to have any of these on your list of number one, I'd be like, yo, I get it. You know, that's just how awesome this series is. But this one in particular is really special, both in the anime and the manga. It's a point in time in this series where you just can't see it coming, and it's why even if you know what happens here, you don't know how, and that's what makes it so special. And I've watched so many reactions ever since the anime reactions started with like Uzumaki Khan, Super Mecha Frieza, Lana Cherie, all these individuals, and then there was like this swarm of individuals catching up to the series since then. Every time somebody reaches this part and I see their reactions to this, it's like even if they know what happens here, they don't know how, and it still makes it so special. Because from the moment that Luffy frees Ace to the end of Marineford, it's literally back-to-back 10 out of 10 chapters. Some of them hundreds, thousands, millions out of 10s. But it's just literal greatness back to back to back, and it's just so goated. It's just so goated. It's the way it's handled is so expertly executed that from the moment that Luffy frees Ace back in volume 58, where is that? In volume 58, right? I mean, I could take it back even further, but because I would just want to go with the legendary momentums, right? Like, yo, from the moment this happens right here in chapter 570 or 571, from right here, yo, we get the both of them boxing, fighting together. Then Akainu comes in, he puts the donut in him, and then we have one of the saddest moments in the history of anything with the death of Ace. As my dog is saying his final words to Luffy. And then following that up, we have an angry Whitebeard who goes in against Akainu, man. And then Blackbeard shows up, and it's just like, what is going on? And then Whitebeard dies. Standing in one of the most goated moments ever. You know something? There are some days that still is my favorite moment, man. Like it's tough. It's tough. Picking a favorite moment in One Piece is so hard. But Whitebeard's death in both the manga and the anime, chapter 576, and I believe that's episode 485. I don't care whether you read or watch One Piece. That is going to be one of the most goated moments ever. It's this Whitebeard, bro. The man died standing, bro, and it's the narrator. It's the narrator. It's the One Piece wash. Shout out to King of Lightning. Jitsuzai Suru. I mean, that's what it is. That's what it is, man. And so it's like Flagnards. Then, this man Blackbeard starts going up in Luxor. He takes Whitebeard's fruit, starts going off. Akainu, man, he goes in because Kobe, attempting to stand up for what he believes in, he starts delivering a speech. And Akainu goes in to take out his very own man. And who shows up to stop that? The man who we never see. The man of legends is the Mr. Santa himself, Shanks, bro. And let me tell you, dog, that to me, that moment is like, you couldn't get more hyped than that. For a long time, that was like my most hype moment ever, man. Shanks shows up. And it's not just Shanks, it's the whole squad. Man back, man. And it's like, yo, then you get the following chapter where Shanks said, yo, the war is over. And Sengoku was like, brother, if that man said the war is over, by God, by the Flagnards, this war is over. This war is over. You feel me? We had the Mihawk moment. We had the little moment between Blackbeard and Shanks. Yo, this scar still aches. Stage. Big fiction. And so then it doesn't even end there. Then, of course, we get to see the Luffy, of course, being taken away by Law. But then we go even into chapter 581, which chapter 581 goes around the world, and we get to have these moments, right? Because, let me actually go back into that chapter, because that is the same chapter that has someone even higher up from Doflamingo, which we had been talking about for so many years after that moment. But this chapter, when it starts going around the world, we get to see Kid again. We get to see the aftermath of what happened here with Whitebeard. We see characters we've never seen before. And it's so good, man. So shout out to that chapter. Shout out to all of those chapters. And it's the end of Marineford, man. What more needs to be said? It is the end of Marineford. And like I said, whether you watch One Piece or you read One Piece, this is a particular part of the story that both sections just knock out of the park. Oda was at his absolute A game when it came to dope spreads in this arc, and everything was just so goated with Marineford. And then in the anime, they did such a marvelous job with the adaptation of Marineford that regardless of how you experience it, it's still going to be peak. And it's such a special part of the story. It contains the highest of peaks in One Piece, and it's the reason why so many people still regard this arc to be among the very best, if not the best. And it's so goat, man. Shout out to Marineford, dude. Shout out to this, dude. It's so goat. Now, finishing us off at number 1, we all knew it was coming. If you had not seen it coming, then you're new to the channel, all right? You're new to the channel because, listen, from the moment these stretches happen, and there too, I cheated for number 1. I said it from the beginning of the video. I cheated for number 1, but I just couldn't help it because these 2 stretches mean the absolute world to me, man. And that is the legendary Roof Piece stretch and the Luffy Tune stretch, man. Chapters 1000 to 1003, 1009 to 1010, and then the chapter 1042 to 1046 stretch. That, to me, and from a weekly experience standpoint and my love for the characters in which I love, that is, to me, my favorite stretches of chapters in the entire series. And it has everything to do with the build-up and setup that we have been going toward, that we have been having for the past decade, leading towards this moment. This has been my entire journey as a weekly reader of this story, culminating with these 2 stretches of chapters. The first stretch in Roof Piece is the most hype stretch ever, man, in regards to Luffy, Zoro, Law, Kid, and Killer, the worst generation, boxing 2 emperors, not just any 2 emperors, Kaido and Big Mom, and Oda never switched to anything else while the first part of this Roof Piece was happening. It was straight hands for 4 weeks. 4 weeks, until, of course, in chapter 1003, he switched over to, CP0, stuff happening down on the floor. But it was, before that, straight hands. Straight hands. And all of those chapters are either 1,000 or 100. There's, the rating system for those chapters begin at 100 out of 10. And they end at like 1,000 out of 10. And then, when we go back to the roof with chapter 1008, we have 1009 and a 1010, which 1010 is one of the most, it is the, look at what I have up here, bro. I got Luffy and Zoro up here, man. These 2 individuals that have been with each other since day 1. They started from the literal bottom of the barrel, and they're boxing Kaido. They're damaging Kaido. Both of them had their greatest power-ups to that point in 1 chapter. 1 chapter. You had this man Zoro utilize Usher for the first time post-time skip against Kaido, and he damaged him. Then Kaido, the savage that he is, goes up in like swimwear, and then you have Goat with the coat, man. And he goes, he comes back, and he finally reveals the Conqueror's coded 12s. You got the Yu Yu Hakusho, in one of the most goated chapters of all time with the Conqueror's coding greatness, right? Then, on top of Roof Piece, on top of all of that insanity that happened there, because that was already hype enough, I could not say it any better than Brago said in one of his Roof Piece videos. That shout out to Brago, where he said, this is going to be a stretch of chapters I'm going to tell my kids about someday, or my grandkids about someday. That's 100% facts. Like, that's how special this was, because all of us were looking so, we just couldn't believe that Oda stayed on there for so long, not switching to anything else. And it was so special, bro. Like, just seeing, it was the worst generation boxing, and it was the way it was handled was just so goat, bro. Like, it's the fact that it's the worst generation versus the Yonko. Like, it was just so clean. It was so goat. So, ending that off on the Conqueror's coding chapter, the fact that Luffy is now utilizing the same attacks that Roger and Whitebeard once did was just, it was perfect. Goated peak fiction, right? But then we get to the truest. Then we get to, and this is all bias, man. we get to Luffy tunes, all right? And as a wrestling fan, chapter 1042, with Luffy and Kaido boxing at the highest level. And then it ends with special guest referee, Scarfino, shout out to Randy Troy, comes in, special guest referee style, makes Kaido hit Luffy. He has that same moment of regret that he did back during the Odin flashback, and we're all like, what in the Flagners is happening? And experiencing all of this weekly was just so crazy, because then we're like, what is going to happen now? Luffy's down. There's no way he's getting back up after this. We go into 1043. We see Kaido going down into the individuals. He's being the savage that he is. He is declaring to everyone that Luffy is dead. We know that he is, because, or at least that he's extremely unconscious, because no one can feel his voice anymore. He's gone. He's out for the count. And so Kaido's down there, he's declaring, he's mad because he's like, yo, once again, victory has been taken away from me. The sense, the truest sense of fighting at the highest level has been taken away from me. And so now we have a situation to where Kaido is bodying everyone down on the floor. The Straw Hats can't believe it. No one can believe it. Like, how in the world did Luffy get defeated? And then we end the chapter on the craziest cliffhanger, arguably, in the entire series, besides the Sabaody one, I would dare to say. And it's the drums of liberation. The drums of liberation, with Zunisha stating that Joy Boy has appeared. The Joy Boy has returned. And we see this goo, or whatever it is, coming off of Luffy's head. And that led us into the craziest, because listen, as somebody who has experienced the craziest upon craziest of post-time skip weekly experiences, right? This was the Gear 4th, the 4 in Dressrosa, where all of us spent those next 2 weeks losing our minds collectively on what Gear 4th was going to be. This was that times a million, because we had no idea where the course of the story would take us. Joy Boy has returned. What do they mean by that? And so many theories, so many discussions, so much hype going into this next chapter, where it was just video after video, all of us collectively discussing. It was such a great time to be in the community, right? So much fun. The chapter in of itself was like 1,000 out of 10. And then what follows that is, I think at this point, it has to be my number one. It's my favorite chapter in the series, man. And it's so hard, like, because One Piece, like I said, has so many GOAT moments. But chapter 1044 is truly on a different level, man. That chapter has everything I love about this series in one chapter. It's perfect. It's so GOAT. It is GOAT raw fire peak fiction at its finest. And I promise that it's just, dog. Even now, I still don't know how to describe how much I love that chapter. But it was reading that chapter, having 1,000 people in our live stream as we discussed that chapter together, getting on social media afterwards and seeing the insane. I had never up until that point. There's been a lot of One Piece broke the internet moments with like the Shanks at the Reverie stuff, the Sabo, the initial Sabo reveal that spoiled so many anime onlys, the Gear 4th, like so many different things that broke the internet. And I don't think any of them had done it like 1043, 1044 did, because that was literally everywhere. Like, I felt sorry for every anime only who got spoiled on that, because it was everywhere. It was everywhere. All right. And so the Gear 5th chapter, man, it's just, how in the world do you give us the true properties, what Luffy's fruit actually is, with the Nika fruit, that confirmation, that reveal, that massive twist? We switch over, screw all that. We switch over to the Mighty Joa. You know, when we switch over to the Mighty Joa, that's an automatic 100 out of 10 chapter. We switch to the Mighty Joa. We see them talking about this fruit. We see Luffy in the pose of legend. And then we switch over to Komurasaki, who has her legendary moment against Orochi. We cut back, and Luffy says, this is my peak. This is Gear 5th. So we got the mythical Zoan reveal, the truth about this man's fruit, the Joy Boy revelation, all of that in the same chapter as Gear 5th. And what is Gear 5th? I don't know, but it looks goated. He goes down, he grabs Kaido, takes him up to the roof. One of the most rawest moments ever. And we're like, what is he? Is he Popeye? His hair looks like he's going Super Saiyan. What's going on? And then we see this man Kaido's eyes start popping out of his head like he's in Toon World in Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's like, brother, what is going on? Brother, what is going on? Yo, Rip Takahashi, man, one of the all-time GOATs, bro. Because it was like, yo, this man Luffy turned this man into a cartoon. And he's just whipping him around. Then he used Mirror Force on him. He used Magic Cylinder on him. And then the official reveal comes in. He's laughing in the most iconic panel, dog, ever. He's laughing. White hair, don't care. Gear 5. And it's just that chapter to me is it's like I said before. Go raw fire peak fiction, man. It's just come on, man. It's peak fiction. And so you go from that. You have all of that insanity, right? That entire chapter, so filled with so much goatness, everything that makes the series so special. And then 1045 actually shows us Gear 5th in the greatest Looney Tunes episode of all time. As we see this man, you jump rope, he goes out of his eyes, he becomes a giant, he uses the Gear 2nd pose to get back into it. It's just Luffy and Kaido throwing hands, and then that chapter is like the greatest showcase of abilities in the series, man. And as someone who loves Gear 5th so much, it's like 1044 and 1045, just having those, it's just, this stretch is so goated, bro. These are all minimum 1,000 out of 10 chapters, right? Minimum. Like, in my personal rankings, people think that I was trolling when it came to the final calculations. I actually calculated. Chapter 1044 to me was 1,000,000 out of 10, and chapter 1045 was a 500,000 out of 10. And those are my 2 highest rated chapters in Wano. I was being dead serious. Like, I put those in the calculations. And so, 1045, of course, with the Luffy versus Kaido and seeing the ability utilized, it was just the coolest thing ever because all we wanted to see was more Gear 5th. That's all we wanted to see. And then it's followed by a 1046 that has Luffy holding. He not only does he proclaim his name once again, which I had been waiting for him to say in this battle after he had lost, who he actually is, because that had been a common theme since part 1 of Luffy vs. Kaido, that he had continuously proclaimed his name, that he is not Joy Boy, he is not Nika, at least to him, he's still Monkey D. He will always be Monkey D. Luffy, and that's why the fruit works here, because anybody else had this fruit, they wouldn't be able to utilize it the same way as Go with the Coat does, because he utilizes his imagination to the highest extent, because that's the way Luffy is. We've seen that throughout the entire series. We saw that with Genzo and the Pinwheel. We've seen that he utilizes the Shanks, the dialogue that he had back in Orange Town. Like, he takes these things from people he looks up to or things he finds interesting, and he turns them into his arsenal, turns them into his own thing, kind of like an artist. And that's the way that Luffy's always fought. That's the way his own being was created. That's something I've always loved about his character. And so when we have him utilizing his ability to its peak, to turn, as it's been stated, right, is the pinnacle of his ability, the pinnacle of rubber, turning everything else into rubber. But in his case, because of his crazy imagination, it makes it look like a cartoon, right? And so he's going out here, Toon World, Toon Force, Luffy Toons, going up in like Storm, where he can even grab lightning in this case. But even in the midst of all of that, he's still the same Monkey D from chapter 1. And he states that within that chapter against Kaido. We have the Raizo and all that stuff happening in that chapter 2. But that finishes off the stretch of legend with Luffy holding the rubber, or rubberizing the lightning, and holding that as they go down to face off against Kaido. And this stretch to me, right, from 1042 to 1046, that is like, dog, 1042 is like 100 out of 10. 1043 is like 1,000. 1044 is like 1,000,000, right? So it's like, they were all so special for different reasons. And it just took everything that I love about this series, and everything I love about anime and manga, because I love my emotional moments. I love my shocking moments. I love the moments whenever we all get to come together as a community and discuss. I love whenever the entire series gets recontextualized. I love whenever themes are explored, like the themes in this case of freedom and imagination with Luffy's ability, man. And it's just how he is now the truest embodiment of the theme of freedom, who Luffy is. And finally, his skill, or his skill finally caught up to his will. And now his abilities are now able to fully showcase everything that's been up in the noggin, because now he's not restricted by reality anymore. He can bend it to its will, literally. And so it's like, I love this entire stretch, what it means to the story. And then as somebody who got into this medium thanks to Dragon Ball, to see us have a moment like this where Luffy has a transformation of legend on the level of the most legendary transformations of all time, it was just a perfect storm of everything I love about anime and manga in one stretch. And everything I love about One Piece. I mean, this had the lore, this had the boxing, this had the transformations, this had the themes, this had the character moments, everything. Everything I could have ever wanted was in this stretch. And consequently also in the Roof Piece stretch. And so On top of everything that's been stated so far, I think the most important thing and the reason why this is placed so high is just how much fun this was to read every single week, man. Every single week, I had a blast reading these chapters. And it wasn't just reading the chapters themselves, it was also discussing the chapters, discussing the possibilities of these chapters, anticipating the next chapter. Just that entire experience was so special to me, and it might have been the most fun I've ever had reading anything weekly. And so on top of everything that was already stated, that's probably the biggest reason why I have this here at number 1. Shout out to these stretches of chapters, man. All of this is why this series is so special, not only to me, but to so many of us. And I look forward to seeing what your favorite stretches in the series are in the comment section down below, man. And so I will see y'all next time. Have an awesome day. We finally did it, man. I'm so glad I did it. I look forward to the next time that we get to come on here and talk about the series. But man, this has finally been the favorite stretch of chapters, dude. We did it, and it was so hard to put these together. I'm probably gonna be eating dinner later. I'm gonna be like, man, I should have put this over the other. But for right now, this is how I was This is how I was feeling at this moment, at this point in time. And a lot of bias here, man. But that's just the way we are, son. So I will see y'all next time. Have an awesome day. One Piece greatness. Let's go, yo.